Welcome to the Infrastructure Podcast. My name is Anthony Oliver, and today's podcast is a bit special. And I have to say, a bit nerve-wracking, as we talk about the challenges, the barriers, and the opportunities for women in leadership with executive coach and strategy consultant Alex Oliver, who, full disclosure, is also my wife. Now, Alex works with a range of people, women and men, across a multitude of sectors, helping all these leaders to, as she puts it, unleash your potential, power your growth, and open up a fulfilling and purposeful life. It is powerful and really important stuff. Understanding what it takes to be a good and effective leader in business is not something that necessarily comes naturally, and almost certainly improves with training and personal awareness. To be honest, I've been looking for an excuse to interview Alex on the podcast for a while, so the launch last week of She Leads, her new women's leadership program, seemed a fantastic opportunity to peer around the door of her office, not least as it coincided with the Association for Consultancy and Engineers' own Female Leadership Conference this week. It is a really important subject. For women in particular, the challenges of leadership are acute, stemming from the continuing lack of gender diversity in the sector, exacerbated by the traditional leadership cultures and underpinned by a failure to appreciate a rake of specific blockers and barriers faced by women in infrastructure. In short, for a sector which needs every ounce of talent, this failure to support and develop the next generation of female leaders remains a glaring missed opportunity. So what to do? Well, let's find out and get some advice from the expert. Alex, welcome to the Infrastructure Podcast.
Thanks, Anthony. I'm really excited to be here.
Great. Well, Alex, let's get straight into it. You have launched a new women's leadership program, which you say is designed to equip women leaders for the mindset, awareness, and skills to thrive in today's dynamic and challenging environment. So what is She Leads?
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. So She Leads, Step Into Your Value is my brand new program, and it brings together a small group of women. We meet fortnightly over a 3 to 4 month period, and we're really helping them to discover what being a leader means to them, you know, in this context today, and how can they really unleash their leadership in a way that is both powerful but also joyful. So each time we meet, we tackle a different topic pertinent to leadership, whether that's looking at strengths or what's holding them back, building resilience, or just unlocking their vision for what they really want, what they want to put out there in the world.
Okay, and you typically work with many leaders, male and female. I suppose, what inspired you to focus on leadership training for women in particular, and putting it in this group context?
Yeah, so it's not really about training. I wouldn't call it training. And it's not even necessarily about leadership roles per se. So, you know, training would be teaching them skills. And we do a bit of skills, obviously tangible things that I want these women to be able to take away. But mainly this coaching, it's helping them to identify what they already have and understanding the value of that, as well as, you know, working through what's getting in their way, what's holding them back, which incidentally is often more stuff on the inside and how we get in our own way rather than external things. So obviously all of that is something that I already do with leaders, men, as you say, as well as women, in one-to-one coaching. But bringing it together in a coaching group, partly it just makes it more accessible because obviously they're gaining a lot of skills at a lower cost than you might say in a one-to-one coaching program. But also really importantly, and probably more importantly, there's something that's so uniquely powerful and empowering about being witnessed by other people. And particularly being women, one advantage that we do have is that women, we tend to be enormously supportive of each other, and bringing women together in that way, there's something incredibly empowering about that, which is why I wanted to bring this program.
Well, yeah, well, that's interesting because I want to delve into this issue. I mean, I tried to set the scene at the start, but why would you say boosting leadership skills and awareness in infrastructure, but across every other profession and every other sector, why is it so important for women in particular, and what specifically might be holding back their performance?
It's a generalization, and I want to be very careful always about stereotyping. But in my experience, women tend to judge themselves particularly harshly. And this applies to me too. And it's been something that I've struggled with. So with the leadership challenges we're facing today, you know, enormously complex. We're faced with so much change, ambiguity, complexity. And leaning into these problems and finding a way through them requires enormous energy and focus. So, women leaders are already investing energy to navigate through these the same way as men, but then often losing more energy worrying about their own performance. So, am I doing it right? What if I get it wrong? What did they think of me? Am I really allowed to do this? All of that is taking our energy in a way that's not productive at all. And it's not adding any value. It's just draining mental energy and time that we could refocus more productively. And all of that is before we've even got started talking about the mental load, what's going on at home, where women still, unfortunately, tend to be picking up more of the load than men.
Not in every home, surely.
Well, let's not get onto that, Anthony.
Okay, right. Well, let's talk about these networks and bringing women together. So how valuable would you say it is for women to have this kind of network with other female leaders to support them? I mean, how do you actually bring those together? How do you facilitate that networking in your program?
Well, it's invaluable, actually, to have a support network of other women. And actually, that's been very well evidenced in research. So I think there was a Forbes study which showed that something like 77% of the highest achieving women have strong ties with an inner circle of other women. So we're really, as I said before, really leveraging something that we're already very good at. And I would encourage, any woman at any point in her career, as she's looking towards her leadership journey, to seek out and really nurture these groups. So this will just be another circle, another group of powerful women that support each other through this journey. And obviously I'm putting in place ways for them to connect with each other in between the sessions even, in a way that I hope that these relationships will support them even potentially beyond the program itself.
And of course, I mentioned that the ACE is running a seminar this week focusing on female leadership, which deals with removing the barriers for women, as we talked about there, but it also highlights the fact that there is still a huge gender disparity in leadership across the infrastructure sector. But of course, you work with leaders from across many different sectors of industry, from finance to charities to aerospace to transportation. I mean, are the leadership issues faced in infrastructure, would you say, similar to many others in different sectors?
They are similar. And, I see similar things present again and again for women or for men, like whether it's lifting ourselves up, to kind of really look at the bigger picture and, step back a little bit and allow other people to step forward. All of those apply to men as well as women. I think, in infrastructure and transport and those projects, they're just on a different scale. So I think, again, the level of anxiety that can provoke for women, where we judge ourselves so harshly and have such high expectations of ourselves, just can be, exponential. So, I mean, again, even speaking from my experience, I spent many years in consulting where we'd spend sometimes weeks or indeed months even, bidding for major projects. And then there comes the moment when you actually win it. And there's a mixture of oh, great. And you're ecstatic and also terrified in the same instant, because then you realize that you've actually got to deliver it. And so I think in infrastructure and transport, the stakes are just that much higher because of the scale of these projects and the level of uncertainty and change. And so I think all of that has the potential just to trigger a lot more anxiety, for women in the desire to get it right.
And of course, the fact that women are still very underrepresented in infrastructure and construction, presumably that makes it even harder.
Of course, it makes it harder. It does make it harder. And I'm one of the generation of women who's grown up in business, in kind of commercial roles, where I'm very used to being the only woman in the room. That's not so much the case in many industries now. However, I think often it still is very much the case in leadership teams in transport and infrastructure. And that is hard, because again, women at the table, we are representing, we're in a leadership role in its own right per se. And then to kind of have to carry the weight of representing our entire gender and all of that implies in terms of responsibilities is hard. Mm-hmm. And that just adds more pressure for us. So
your program started earlier this month. You've got 6 women who are from all different sectors, all different backgrounds. What would you say you hope will come out of that program and really help them to become better leaders, and I suppose and give them skills, techniques, mindsets that will be noticed in the workplace?
Yeah, I have high hopes for them. And I hope they'll come out of it lighter, more joyful, less weighed down with these expectations, with these judgments that they may have of themselves. I hope they'll come out, as you say, with some tools and techniques that they can fall back on, that they can remember and bring to the fore. That they'll have more confidence and that they'll have more energy, because I think like so much of this is really about having the positive energy and not, losing our energy and negative emotion on thoughts which really aren't serving us and aren't serving those around us. So lighter, more joyful, more energy, more confident to kind of like take their leadership and unleash it into the world.
Good stuff. Well, it is, as you say, powerful stuff, but let's talk a little bit more about you, Alex, to get a context for how this all comes together, because you've mentioned quite a few things in your background along the way. You started your career in media with Express newspapers after studying French and art history at Bristol, but quickly found your way into strategy consulting after spending a year studying for your MBA at globally renowned business school INSEAD in Fontainebleau, France. So how did that MBA enable you to really turbocharge your career 30 years ago?
Well, it really did. I think it gave me huge confidence in myself. I went into that. Firstly, I was amazed that I got in the first place. I was so filled with self-doubt. And then having got in, I sort of found myself there with my degree, as you say, in like French literature and surrounded by, statisticians and engineers and just really thinking, can I do this? Am I in the right place? And what I found was that I could, and that did give me enormous confidence that I could hold my own. And I think there's an expression that goes something like, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. And so that experience did give me more self-belief, and it's an ongoing journey, and I've really certainly had many, many dips in the road. But I think that experience gave me that little bit more self-belief and confidence in myself to believe that I could do some different things and some difficult things.
Okay.
There's something else I want to add to that answer, if I may, Anthony, because it's something that I didn't learn when I was there, but I only learned later. And it's this. So as I say, when I was at INSEAD, I was slightly different. And it wasn't just because of my educational background. It was also because of the way that I showed up. And I am a naturally enormously empathetic leader. I care deeply, and I show emotion. And back then in the 90s, that was not necessarily considered a strength in leaders, and probably, if I'm honest, particularly so in women. And this is something that I also take a really important stand for, because what we are now seeing, and thanks to leaders like Jacinda Ardern and many, many others, actually empathy, kindness, all of those qualities in men as well as in women are huge strengths. And these are qualities that, whether through nature or nurture, women often do embody in the workplace. And these are important leadership qualities.
Well, I think your career does in many ways exemplify some of the things you're talking about here, because it has been through so much change, and you have in many ways grown hugely as a professional, because of course since those strategy consulting days you've been on quite a journey, riding the dot-com wave with startups like advertising business Scoot, and then banking with Egg, before heading into government at the Cabinet Office. They were heady can-do days. They were different, as you say, but they were certainly can-do days. What have you learned along the way about leadership in these roles?
Well, I've learned that it starts with you. Who we are is how we lead. Who you are is how you lead. So that's one thing that I've learned, actually, and particularly in the last few years, and partly through all the coaching experiences and coach training experiences I've been through, the importance of self-care. I almost had a burnout myself, actually, which we can come and talk more about later if that's useful. But and the second thing that I really learned is constantly about lifting up other people. One of my early managers said to me, always hire better than you. I always remember that piece of advice, and it's true. But whether you hire better than you or not, but you can always develop those people beneath you in your teams, lift them up, empower them, give them opportunities, because that will give you space to grow, and that's always a good thing.
Well, let's talk about that area, that period of your life when you had to change what you were doing, because you went from client side to consulting. You joined the Futures company, which then morphed into Kantar Public. It was a big role. You led research teams helping governments around the world to better understand the needs of their citizens. You were we were running a family as well as working very hard. It was your last corporate job before branching out alone to form Oliver Boo. Tell us about that. What prompted that change?
Well, I was in my early 40s, and it's funny now because looking back, I think, well, it was a big role. I had a lot of responsibility, but it wasn't that big. I mean, there are many people who sail through roles that hold much more responsibility. But at that time, I was just under acute pressure, but most of it, again, from myself. So I was under pressure at work. I did have responsibilities and targets. But as you say, we also had young children at home, and I was holding myself to such unattainably high standards at work and at home, or possibly I could just about attain them, but there was absolutely zero space left for myself for self-care. And what that meant is that whilst really enjoying all these aspects of my life, I love my job, I love my clients, and I love my family life at home. You'd be happy to hear, but I wasn't a happy person. I just felt overwhelmed. It's that feeling of overwhelm, and I'd lost the joy in all of these things that I was doing, and I had to stop and reset. So it was difficult, and I did that, and I did leave, and I found myself starting to work for myself, which was not my plan A. It was my plan B that turned into plan A, and it worked out really well.
And of course, for the last 10 years or so, you've been balancing your business consulting work with your passion for coaching, and helping others and individuals and teams, as you put it, to get more out of their life, achieve bigger goals, expand their horizons, and truly transform their lives, businesses, and communities. You're a certified coactive coach, and you now have a rake of other qualifications and coaching skills under your belt to help your clients. I mean, what led you from that consulting world into that coaching life?
Ooh, well, I love telling this story because it was such a transformational wake-up moment for me in my life. And you may remember, Anthony, indeed, when I first put a little tiptoed or put a toe in the water in coaching, I had no idea that I would then throw myself headlong into this career change. I just went for a tryout weekend with Coactive to see what it was like. And the experiences that I went through in those 2 to 3 days were transformational for me. And I went in happy, relatively content with my life, curious. And I came out, it was like as though someone had opened all the doors and windows. And I just suddenly realized, my God, there's so much more. There's so much more I could be. There's so much more I could experience. There's so much more I could put out there. And that was it. So then I committed, and I went through all of the certifications, and I'm fortunate enough today to be doing this work that I love so much.
You do indeed absolutely love it with a passion. Communication, though, is clearly key to your success, and being fluent in French and Spanish is clearly very helpful on family holidays. But I imagine it is also great for helping to gain a better insight into different cultures and I suppose what makes people tick. I mean, would you agree with that?
Of course, I agree with that. And, and again, thinking about leadership, as I've already really alluded, so much of it is about relationships. It's about truly taking the time to understand people. And, how often do we really do this? How often do we really sort of suspend our own thoughts, what we're worried about, what we're thinking about in our own heads, and really listen to them? And I think any way that we can reduce friction in communication when we're speaking to other people can only enhance the exchange of ideas and how we come to solutions. And obviously speaking someone's language is just another way to do that, to reduce that friction, but not the only way.
Okay. Well, obviously the international nature of your work at INSEAD gave you a great sort of global business tools, but it also and interestingly, gave you a really diverse and powerful network of friends and colleagues. And we all have great networks. Now we're trying to work on our great networks, whether it's social networks or whether it's actual physical networks. I mean, how important would you say that these business networks are to modern leaders?
Yeah, I'd say they're essential because, again, with the pace of change that we're seeing in the world, with all of the change, all of the uncertainty, there's just no way that we will come up with all the answers ourselves. It doesn't matter how smart we are, how much expertise or experience we've got in our sector, in our function. Things are just changing too quickly. So the only way that we can really find the answers that we need is working collaboratively, working with different people. So networks inside our own organisations, cross-functionally, but also outside, are invaluable for that, as well as obviously for, advancing our own careers. And, and it's a very important thing for women. And again, not always easy for women, in the same way that it has been for men, but but essential.
But I imagine that there's a real issue around avoiding echo chambers, though, because we did some work with the Major Projects Association recently around avoiding the dangers of echo chambers and only hearing what you want to hear.
Well, absolutely. And we've got all of these behavioural biases, so, we have the confirmation bias and all of the groupthink and, so being aware of those, and I know you've done work on this, Anthony, also with certain speakers in the infrastructure podcast like Rory Sutherland and et al. But being aware of these risks helps, but also, again, this is the power of diversity, because the more diversity we have, the more diversity of perspectives that we'll bring. So, obviously it's broader than just about gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, etc. But diversity of thinking that's brought from different cultural backgrounds and just different experiences can help to mitigate some of that risk.
Okay, you're very, very busy, of course, but you spend time away from work doing weekly park runs, Lido swimming in the cold, horse riding, and you're now passionate about the power of meditation and are known to head off for the odd yoga retreat. So how important to you, you've mentioned it a bit already, but how important would you say it is to you and to other busy professionals to really carve out that time for you?
Well, I think you're making my personal life sound a little bit more sort of exciting and varied than it is. I mean, I'd be delighted to be getting back to weekly park runs, actually, but there we go. That's an aspiration, something to work towards. And likewise, even meditation. However, to answer your question, it is, I think, because as I've said, who you are is how you lead. And this is something so important. And I spend a lot of time working with my dear friends at Complete, talking about this, how leadership starts with the I. And it does start with you. It starts with you, your self-awareness of who you are and how you show up. It starts with your self-care and your energy management. And it starts with you, really, because of the alignment of your purpose with what you do. And the more you can bring that into the work you do, the more energy that can unleash in you and in others. So all of that is only possible if you carve out time for yourself, if you take care of yourself, and if you invest in managing your own well-being and energy.
Which is why you need to encourage your husbands to go sailing more often. Definitely.
No encouragement needed.
No. Well, let's get focused back on leadership skills and the many unique challenges facing women in particular in leadership roles. And we discussed some of them, and perhaps we can touch on a few of them more specifically. I mean, one of those is the so-called imposter syndrome. What is that, and what tools and sort of strategies do you give your clients to help them build confidence and get over that?
Yeah. So, I don't want to make this specifically about women. I have many men clients. I love working with men and who also have imposter syndrome. Sometimes it's harder for them to kind of actually accept and acknowledge that. And it's okay because, we're human, and this is part of being human. We all have these voices that don't serve us, whether it's self-limiting beliefs like imposter syndrome or other. And actually, first, accepting it, just notice it. Don't judge yourself. Don't compound that negative energy by judging yourself for it. Just notice it, shine a light on it. I notice that this voice is coming to the fore. In coactive coaching, we call these saboteur voices, and we have different ones. So just think, okay, my judge saboteur is here now, like judging me. And, even if you can sometimes add some humor, just know that it's human. Shine a light on it, notice it, name it, notice the feelings that are coming up in you, the physical sensations that are associated with that. All of that just helps to defuse your attention from it so that you can be having that experience rather than it having you and dominating you.
Mm-hmm. Because work-life balance is another major topic for women and for men. And of course, you have touched on it quite a bit already. But how have you personally managed the demands of leadership with personal life? Have you handled stress and maintained well-being as a leader? What advice do you offer to try to manage that?
Yeah. And again, I just want to be really transparent. I haven't always managed it very well at all, and I think part of the reason that I do this work myself now is that I've been on this journey myself, and I continue to do this work as I travel on this journey. So again, again, just know yourself, know your boundaries, know what feels right for you. Trust yourself, trust those feelings. Know when you're kind of tipping over the top of, too much pressure, the pressure performance curve. And take action. Know when it's time to stop, to kind of scale back, simplify, whether it's at work and or at home, and just allow yourself to take that time out without feeling guilty about it. Because actually, you need to do that, and other people around you need you to do that in order that you can show up at your best. So again, self-awareness, self-care without guilt, and notice the guilt and just name it and move on.
Well, of course, the shift to remote or hybrid working has really impacted all workers and all people in business and in leadership roles. I mean, how do you think those changes perhaps offer more challenges or perhaps even more opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a live topic, isn't it, for so many clients, actually, hybrid working. Should we go back to the office or and actually we often debate this, and there are pros and cons. So I think there's no one size fits all, and I think, it depends on the client and the situation. I mean, I would just say, there are benefits. Again, we need to find a way to harness the benefits that come with being part of a community, and that really having those feelings of belonging, and where there's psychological safety, obviously, that goes along with that, because that can be very supportive and very empowering for people, particularly at earlier stages of their career, and obviously what a joy, how wonderful now that there is more flexibility. And I can imagine that would have transformed my own experience of working had I had more of that flexibility in earlier days of my career, when I was sweating and stressed about, rushing home to pick up kids from childcare, or when I had a sick kid at home.
Exactly. Well, finally, an issue that I helped the ICE Women in Fellowship group recently tackle is resilience, and the need in particular for women, but also for men, to work on strategies to help build that resilience and ability to, I suppose, let things bounce off of you at work. What's your advice to help women and men, I suppose, also, to handle the pressures and setbacks that come with leadership positions?
Well, I think this is such a big topic, and it is one that I'll be tackling with my group in my She Leads coaching group. And again, it's, working with your body. I think it's very easy to sort of think that we're just this head and it's all kind of going on in our head. And actually, guess what? We're a head attached to a body, and a lot of what we're facing when we're stressed and feeling under pressure is going on in other parts of our body. So, a lot of this is understanding that, knowing that, and knowing how to work with your body rather than against it. And that's a whole big topic, actually, that probably need a whole other podcast for.
We'll better carve out some time for that then. But just to wrap up then, it is, as you say, it's a big subject, one that we have barely scratched the surface of. But what advice would you give organisations that are looking to better support women in leadership? What practices are there from your training and your work that they could implement? I
think coaching is invaluable. Obviously, people have to be ready for it. They need to be ready to and want to be able to do the work, and including sometimes maybe being uncomfortable, as well as feeling incredibly supported. But also mentoring groups, having a mentor, I think, is really powerful for a woman in leadership role, or even two. When I used to be a volunteer mentor, actually, for women's leadership schemes that run by my old business school network at INSEAD, and women would have a male mentor as well as a female mentor. And I think that can also be incredibly useful to kind of get a different perspective.
Mm-hmm. And if there are women listening in today that want some help or some advice about leadership, how might they get involved with She Leads?
Well, reach out to me on LinkedIn or through the website. Please do. I'm running the first cohort now into the new year, but there will be others. And whether this first cohort is nice, actually, because it's a bunch of women from different walks of life, different ages and life stage, which, in itself brings beautiful different perspectives, but also open to doing these in-house. So please do get in touch. I'd love to hear from you.
Alex, that's brilliant. Thanks so much for joining me on the Infrastructure podcast today. I've been looking forward, as I say, to getting you on the podcast for quite some time. So it's fantastic to have a great opportunity and a really important topic to discuss. So really interesting conversation. I thought, thanks for sharing.
Well, it's been great to have this opportunity, Anthony, to tell you more about what I actually do. So thank you.
No, it's been good to peer around the office door and find out what's actually been going on in there.
time for a cuppa.
Exactly, I'll go and sort that out. Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
That's all we've got time for today, though, on the Infrastructure Podcast, but we've got more in the pipeline and more guests to talk to as we continue to probe the big issues faced across the sector. If you haven't done so already, do check out the Infrastructure Podcast website, www.infrastructure-podcast.com, where you'll find background information and some links to some of the topics that Alex has been talking about. But there's also all the latest podcasts to listen to and to share. So thanks for joining us. Thanks again to Alex, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon.